Hello and welcome to today's episode of Performing Animal Rights, the podcast series where we delve into the intersection of performing arts and creative practice within the animal rights movement. I'm Ben Hunt, a performing artist and researcher dedicated to exploring how the performing arts contribute to the cause of animal rights. In this episode, we have the privilege of speaking to the incredibly talented Bibi Lucille, an award-winning actor who not only wrote but also starred in the thought-provoking one-woman show Meet Cute. This play, which navigates the complexities of veganism and dating, captured the hearts and minds at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival last year, thanks to the efforts of Bibi and the vegan theatre company Patch Plays. Bibi's passion for veganism shines through her work, and today she shares with us the journey of creating and performing Meet Cute. We dive into her creative process, the challenges she faced, and how her art serves as a vehicle for advocacy and change. For those who are inspired by the fusion of creativity and activism, or perhaps are looking for a fresh perspective on how art can influence and shape social movements, this is the perfect episode. And remember, if you are enjoying the conversation and want to support the show, please subscribe, follow, and leave us a review on your podcast platform or YouTube. Your support helps us reach more listeners and continue bringing insightful discussions to the forefront of creative activism. And all that's left to say is on with the episode. Thank you, Bibi, for joining me today. It would be great to just jump straight into it and ask about Meet Cute. So how did it evolve from the idea to the incredible production you've put on?
Oh, flatter me. Well, the way it started, I'd never really written anything before that was kind of intended for the public. It was always kind of just like my diary or, my diary. So my cousin Annie, who runs the theatre company Patch Plays, we were having like a socially distanced wine night in 2020, and she wanted she wanted to put on kind of like a scratch night or just something where we could all the unemployed creatives can do something. And she was like, you should write something like kind of about veganism, like that has to be the topic of the night, is like veganism. And she basically suggested that I should write about how I try and always turn guys that I date vegan and how that's kind of like a form of activism. And I was like, that is such a great idea in itself. So I think that night I was still super drunk and woke up at like 5, and I just kind of started having these ideas about it. And I just got my phone out and started just writing away. And then I had this like 10-minute sort of stand-up piece. And then yeah, like it went down well at the scratch night in terms of, I think with comedy it's so easy to really freak out and doubt yourself because you're not sure if your sense of humor is like really weird. And it was nice to see that it translated well. And I think from there, because we were like, well, we can't let this die now. And then because also we had all the time in the world, we were then just writing, doing rewrites, and over a few months managed to make the full play. And yeah, started in pub theatres, doing whatever bits we could, and then did the Vaults Festival and then Edinburgh. And now it's been 3 years, and I think it's time for the baby to die. We keep saying it's the play that just doesn't die. It just keeps being put, like, we keep putting it on, but at some point we're gonna have to stop.
Oh, bless you, yeah. Well, the fact that it got published is such a massive step for making its mark on the theatre landscape. With that, I suppose, comes the opportunity for other people to pick it up and go, "Oh, I'd like to put that on." But when you're talking about the with Annie and about how it was like coming together and about your experiences with veganism and dating, when you thought about veganism, because it's so personal, but also not personal at the same time. Like there's a whole concept around it, and there's people who sign up for it and are very either heavily invested in it or interpret it in their own way, but it's also a deeply personal thing as well, and how they interact with themselves and others around them. When you were thinking about creating this piece and performing it as stand-up or as a full play, was there any apprehension about like it being more of an obstacle than a open door, or was it vice versa, where like this is, like you said, you woke up at 5 and you were writing, it was clearly some sort of well of kind of creativity, like a spark. Was veganism part of that, or was it something else?
Oh, that's such a good question. You know what? The veganism really actually fueled so much of the creativity. Mainly because there's so much emotion behind it, and like because creativity stems from emotion, and I think feeling injustice is such a strong emotion, and the anger that comes with it, and also like the anger that you feel for years, like no, from the day you kind of sort of realize the awful things going on and how horribly unnecessary and also just fueled by selfishness essentially and consumerism and all of that. Like the day you learn about it, the anger never goes away. Like it will never stop for as long as it exists, and it shouldn't. And I think feeling I'm getting angry now. So you feel like feeling that and then being able to have an outlet for it in the form of, well, what you love doing and something enjoyable and also something that can entertain people, I think it's kind of like the perfect marriage in a way. And I guess whenever you watch a play or a film that has a sort of a deeper meaning, or it's fighting for something or trying to get a message across, you can really tell there's so much passion behind the writing rather than something that's kind of just there to entertain you and just be an entertaining film. It's when you've really got a message behind something, it fuels more creativity, I think. I think especially with the end scene as well. I mean, so much of that was just like, I'm just going to write and pour out everything I've been wanting to say. And it's also more cathartic than I remember years ago. I used to do like protests and like standing outside Canada Goose or outside McDonald's and whatever. And there was no, it was not cathartic in any way. It was just made you feel more like despair about the whole movement because of the amount of people they'd walk past and throw abuse at you, verbal abuse, and then the police getting involved, and the activists are always the ones who are in the wrong on the side of the law, which is so frustrating. So I think finding writing as an outlet for a lot of the passion and the emotion really helps, and I think it translates to other people as well, and possibly is more effective than doing physical, well, I don't know. I say that. I was about to say more effective than physical protests, but they are still really effective. But also in the way that it just taps into people's empathy. And when they see that you're passionate about something and that you care, it kind of bleeds over to them because they're really understanding your character and what they're going through. And you're on this journey with them for a whole hour, 2 hours. I think it's such a great way to get a message across.
What I found is a pattern there with artists, and there's another half to this, I suppose, and activists, where the injustice and the anger generates work. It generates theatre, it generates songs, it generates types of activism, which I find fascinating. And
Yeah.
there's a few things you've said there, which would be really interesting to pick up. I suppose the first one is when you mention like it generates it really the injustice and the anger kind of this is writing gives you an outlet for that. Suppose
Yeah.
it'll be really interesting to pick your brains about how from writing it and workshopping it and performing it in the 10-minute bits to fully performing it day after day for a month in front of, I'd imagine, a lot of audiences that you didn't know, because at Edinburgh Fringe you just rock up and see something that catches your eye. And you guys, just on a side note, did really well with the visuals. It really hooked. You could tell it's a really good hook, and you can imagine a lot of people just wandering in just from the poster alone. Was there a shift there, or an evolution of how you performed it day after day? Was that injustice and anger still there? And if so, how did it translate to the audience? If you got any feedback from that, whether on stage just at that time or afterwards, or if not, what else was there, or was it the buzz of performing, or a cocktail, a mixture of all of that?
Yeah, I think it kind of shifted and morphed over the 3 years. I think the first time performing it, I think it was more that it was just really enjoyable. And even the end scene, I don't think I felt the anger because I kind of I was so excited by the idea of this going out into the world for the first time, and then also like having such nice feedback the first few shows. Um, so in a way, I think that, and also because I was really excited to get the message across and to see how people responded and like empathized with the character. But then as the shows went on, it then started to go into I was getting frustrated because I mean, you know how it is. Like people come up to you and they start going, "Yeah, I tried being vegan once. I did nearly die." Um, and kind of hearing that over and over, I was getting really like so frustrated because I thought, firstly, clearly you're saying this to someone who has an insane amount of passion for this and has put a lot of work and energy into trying to get people to understand and empathize. And now they're trying to kind of argue it or justify what they're doing, which so then I had a few shows where I was just kind of annoyed most nights and started to feel like maybe it wasn't making the change that I thought it would. And then I think I managed to get into a rhythm with it. So in Edinburgh, I mean, Edinburgh was so tough anyway, just the workload and the schedule, that the first 2 weeks, well, the week I wasn't ill, I was kind of getting, it was just a mess of the illness brewing, getting annoyed about getting frustrated at the end of the play, and getting into that emotional mindset, and then all the workload as well. And then I think the last 2 weeks of it, I got into a rhythm of kind of being able to feel the emotion on stage, but just having a moment outside afterwards to just let it go. Like I just have to let it go. Otherwise I'm just going to be annoyed and it's going to ruin my evening. And it's just, I can't keep doing that cycle. But it's hard though, when it's, especially, when you're acting, I think you do actually feel the emotions and you get into it and your body kind of reminds you of the emotions and you do get into that headspace and it can be quite tough. Yeah, I don't know how to finish that thought. But no, it's been frustrating, definitely. I think it's just people arguing about it at the end. It feels like they've missed the whole point. If you're still trying to justify the horrible the thing that you've learned about for an hour and still trying to justify it. Especially like because there's the scene at the end where she goes to one of the protests outside the slaughterhouse where you can hear what's happening to them. You look into the animals' eyes and you see that they look like ours. Their eyes, they feel they're scared. And yeah, the frustration of that and people still trying to say that it's okay is so damn annoying.
For sure, yeah, and I mean, that sounds very much like the experience you get when you maybe you're on the street giving flyers out, and it's a very quick conversation. It's glancing, kind of, or at the dinner table with your family or with friends. But actually having sat through for an hour and then coming out with that must be another level of frustration. And I suppose when you said there of you had to let go at the end, I can imagine that being even more difficult because there's a biographical element to that. It's not that you're playing someone completely different. It's highly influenced from your own experiences. So I can imagine that being quite tough as well. I f-
Yeah, like there's no disconnect in a way because you're just you can't. Well, I guess I was kind of talking as myself in a way, just like a heightened version of myself. So no, yeah, I guess there's no coming out of character if you're basing the character off of you.
when you mentioned the about activism, like activist events being very frustrating for the activists because there's a lot of tension in the streets or wherever it is. There's a lot of like conflict, whether that's physical or non-physical. There's conflict there, but the theatre allows this kind of space for a captive audience that are engaged, and it's not threatening because it's not forcing them to sit down, and it's not going, you must listen to me. It's like you've chosen to come here and watch this film, this theatre piece about veganism, it's a play and you sat down and you're engaging with it. Do you think the arts? This is quite a broad, bold question, so feel free to just shoot me down if it's ridiculous. But do you think the art has that potential to be a perfect Venn diagram of
No, you mean hybrid?
a hybrid? Yeah, perfect. A hybrid of activism and instilling change in an engaged and captive audience. There's an irony there, isn't there? We're capturing the audiences to tell them not to capture animals. We dig that deep. But
Next
yeah,
one.
what yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you're so right. Like, because like you said, it's a safe space, and they're not being forced to be there. Like, with protesting, they're kind of obviously trying to um get people to listen when, they just don't want to. Whereas I think theatre, because it's especially in the medium of you're you're telling a story, so you're not necessarily kind of just throwing facts, because I think with humans, like, it's so, when you watch the news and there are so many facts and figures and, like, 10 million dead from blah blah blah, and you don't feel the emotion of, like, a human reaction to hearing about death, because of the cognitive dissonance. Because if you just hear facts, why on earth would you put yourself through the emotion of actually having to think about it? And I think it's the same with any kind of protesting. Whereas in the arts, because they're telling a story and you can actually see the face of one person and their story and their opinions and how it affects them, it takes on this whole new personability. Is that a word? It is now. The personability of relating to someone and understanding what they're going through and actually putting a face to it. And I think that's what makes it so special and so important and so crucial to any kind of protesting, or making any kind of change in the world. You have to do it through us at some point so that people can fully understand. And also, I think comedy was such a key part to the play. In terms of, comedy is when you're laughing with people and it bonds you and you feel so much safer, and it's such a special moment to kind of share with people, and especially to share with strangers, to be able to make them laugh. And so immediately throughout the first half of the play, they warm to the character of Lena, because she's kind of funny. She's got a sense of humor about her. She doesn't take anything too seriously, and then everybody bonds in a way. Like, she bonds with the audience. She's talking to them. It's kind of like they're having a chat. Then they can actually see someone who kind of maybe resembles a friend, then seeing how much they're kind of suffering in trying to fight for this cause, and how much they then realize the audience are the ones contributing to this horrible injustice, I guess. Theatre is so special. Film is. Comedy is. I think with Okja as well. Oh my God, such a flawless film in the way it was actually, like, they had really funny moments and brilliant characters, and you really, like, feel so much protectiveness over this little girl as well, and seeing what she goes through, and you're like, oh my God, surely people are watching this and seeing how they're hurting people like this, and people and their bond with their animals. And I mean, I remember well, sadly she's not vegetarian anymore, but my sister went vegetarian for a bit, and she said to my mum, I feel sorry for Bibi. I feel so bad, because because she feels so upset all the time about what's going on. And that's so, like, what a revelation to have, to realize that you're actually really upsetting your loved ones. Which kind of circles back to, like, dating people who aren't vegan, in the way that seeing someone you love eating an animal is, like, horrible. Like, it's actually distressing. And again, that never goes away. That'll never go away for as long as you care. Um, and I don't think people understand that. I don't think they find it really hard to understand that. Whereas, on my side, I find it hard to understand that. How people cannot realize how distressing it is. God, it just feels like it's all such a mess.
It is messy. Like you say, just there that it's so personal as well, isn't it? And I think the message of veganism sometimes can get watered into this kind of philosophical kind of dwelling on, when in reality it's people living these lives and navigating a very like skewed towards away, well, skewed away from veganism so much that everyone's living in this world and we're trying to navigate that world. It's not a case of we've got two worlds and we're living separately and we're navigating this crazy, this messy world. So it can be, yeah, super messy. Is your practice, your creative practice of writing and performing, with that in mind, the frustrations and the injustice and the anger and the emotions that you felt, and you feel, is theatre, film, art a form of resilience and a form of, I wouldn't say therapy because I think that's quite blanket, but a form of resilience, a form of care, a form of self-care?
Mm, ooh. Oh yeah, I guess so. I mean, considering I didn't make any money from the play, it was definitely for a form of yeah, self-care, I guess, like doing something you love and something you're passionate about, and not only enjoying performing and enjoying the process of writing, also having that like added element of feeling like you're making a difference in some way and that it's going to actually hopefully save lives. If one person goes vegan or one person goes, I mean, maybe veggie or doesn't eat meat that night, it's like hopefully there's like tiny changes that can be, I guess, satisfying in a way, tiny wins, because lots of little tiny ones hopefully makes a bit of a change.
I mean, that even like it could feel small, but you're right, exactly. Imagine if they walked out that night instead of going to one restaurant, they went to the many lovely establishments in Edinburgh that serve delicious vegan food. Like just that in itself, that gesture, that shift is really exciting and is really because no one, well, I don't know. I was going to say no other theatre or film does that, but I suppose they do. I suppose you go and see something about the Iraq War, you're maybe going to walk out and donate your money or whatever. But as a very personal thing where you've shown in your performance that you can make tangible changes because you're a person living and breathing and doing those things, living in this world, the world that many theatre audiences live, that they can go out and be that person and be influenced by that. When you're talking about comedy, when I've interviewed people or researched performing arts in animal rights specifically, comedy is really interesting in the sense it's such a dire, awful thing that's going on to all these animals and to the people connected to it as well. It's a knock on it. It's a like a trauma earthquake.
That's so true. It's a trauma earthquake. It affects everything: animals, humans, the environment, future generations. Like, it's a ripple effect across the world. Like, it's definitely not just the animals suffering.
For
It's,
sure. And I suppose it's really interesting thinking about grappling with humor in that. I suppose as humans we do have we rely on humor in the darkest of times. When you said about your what about Meet Cute and about how it very much starts as a comedy and then gets there's a heaviness, and a lot of really good stories are like that. They start with a likable character and you bond, and it's the humor is a big part of that. Were you super conscious of that, and even more so with this, or was it just a general storytelling device that you know and love and you wanted to apply to this, or was there another layer to this where it's like, okay, we're talking about veganism here, we're talking about animals, we're talking about something that's happening right now, it's this trauma earthquake that's going on. How do I deal with comedy with that? Was there any conversation in your head about that?
there wasn't in a weird way. I think it was more that I have always I think comedy's always been like my favorite genre to perform, to watch, to write. And I think because humor is so embedded in my opinion, just having a good life and a good time. And also, it's for me that is entertainment. Like watching dark stuff is nice, but if there's like even dark comedies, if there's a joke thrown here and there, I think that's what makes something really alive for me. So yeah, humor. I think it was just not even a question. It was just like I know for a fact I want like 90% of this to be entertaining and funny and almost in the way that comedy, you know how like stand up sometimes they can tackle issues, but in such a brilliant, clever, performative, entertaining way. Sorry, informative. And also, what I love about comedy is that it kind of pokes fun at how ridiculous it all is, and the way that we stereotype people, in the way that it's actually quite ridiculous that we've now got this whole industry that everybody's now fighting against, and like, it's leaking into personal lives and your relationship with your family, and how also silly arguments about it can sound, especially with your, family dinners. And yeah, it was never it I think it just came very, very naturally. And also because it was never ever none of the jokes were ever going to really undermine the movement at all. It was kind of just shining a light on how ridiculous it is that we actually eat meat and have these stereotypes.
And you're right. The comedy in the play definitely comes from the stereotypes and the characters themselves. It's not. You're right. It's not poking fun at any the actual issue. Just go into that then. Go into the stereotypes and go into your performance of Meet Cute and your different characters you make. So yeah, it's a one woman play, but it's all these different characters you bring in. As a performer and well, as a writer and as a performer, how do you grapple with that? What's your process in using comedy and interchanging all these different characters? Because there's loads going on here. First off, you wrote the play. Second off, you're performing someone very close to you as the main character. Third
Mm.
off, you're performing these characters around your main character, and there's a layerings of comedy, but there's also the veganism side as well. So, as a performer, how did you? Well, talk me through your process of embracing all these different characters and how you approach that. I mean, there's different elements of physicality there, isn't there? And then getting into the head of these characters, and if you did that at all or much, what was your process around that?
I think it was because it was leaning so far into Lena lives in quite a ridiculous heightened world where everyone she encounters is a stereotype. And in a way she's kind of a stereotype herself, and being the crazy vegan. And so I kind of just drew on the comedy of that, of having, Chad Waller, the businessman who is really obsessed with briefcases and his own fake Rolex watch. And then another sort of like typical vegan character of Lark Sparrow, who goes by his kind of fake last name and he wears ponchos and stuff. So I think getting into those characters, because it was just like mad comedy, it was mainly down to Annie directing the different characters and how the physicality was going to be. And I mean, because she's so thorough with her directing, she was like, I want you to create like character bios about them, do a little backstory about them, and really, it really brings them to life. So the second I sort of step into the other person and do the voice and the physicality, they really actually become people and they become real, which is, yeah, definitely down to her. And just like the great methods she uses, and how much detail she kind of focuses on with those characters. Which is funny because like with really ridiculous characters, in a way you're almost like, but they're not a person, so why would I have to give them like a whole backstory? But they kind of are, like people are ridiculous, and we do fall into our own stereotypes a lot, I think. You kind of choose the when you're growing up, you're figuring out who you are, and then you kind of choose the kind of persona you want. Do I want to be like the cool guy, or do I want to be the gamer? And we fit ourselves into boxes to kind of give ourselves an identity, and it's, yeah, I think it kind of reflects that. Yeah, they fit themselves into a box and they're very happy there, and they're like, this is me. And then it ties into like the stubbornness of people being like, well, this is me, this is what I do, and I'm not changing for anyone.
Yeah,
um
that's it's interesting that you had those people at the end of your play say that as well. It's like I am in this box and I won't move from this box even though I found your play interesting. So there's these stereotypes in your audience as well, which is it gets
yeah.
it gets very meta then, I think. It gets very yeah, you could write a whole philosophical blog about it or something.
So it's almost surreal in the way that you feel, even coming out of the play, I feel like I'm still in that world because of how actually quite strange it is and quite a weird experience it is to feel kind of like you're the only one who it's almost like you're what there's like a zombie apocalypse going on, but no one else seems to think that there's anything wrong with it. So you're constantly kind of like, guys, seriously, there's something like seriously, we need to wake up.
You're right, and it's really it can be quite frightening, can't it? Especially when you shine a lens on it in the performance as a this is a performance, and then you go out and everyone's playing the same characters, but in reality, ugh, scary.
Yeah, it's really quite weird. Oh, you're so right. There's definitely a play in that as well.
What was well? I mean, first off, it's very evident that Meet Cute thrives or thrived on the Fringe setup. Really, I know obviously it was exhausting for you, um, but you were getting great reviews. You're getting people through the door. You published your play. Like there's great levels of success there in the Fringe setup. So I suppose it's a double pronged question in the sense of, as you as a performer, as a creative, have obviously, like you mentioned before, you didn't make any money. So there's pros and cons. And you got quite ill as well because it was so stressful. As a creative, as a performer, how what do you feel about Fringe, first off? And but also on the flip side, with the subject of veganism and Fringe, is that the place to introduce this idea and to develop this idea? Is it a great platform to really stretch those ideas?
Yeah, it is a great platform to get those ideas out, definitely, because you get so many different people going to Fringe, and people from all walks of life, from all over the world, come and they'll take a chance on a play. They'll just be like, "What's on down the road?" And it's a great place to sort of have something like a message if you want to reach it far and wide, but you don't want to have to go far and wide. Just go to Scotland. But having said that, it does have to, because of how competitive it is and the nature of the Fringe, if you got getting your message out, you've got to make sure it's like marketed quite cleverly. It can't sort of seem like it's going to be preachy or seem like it's going to be, put people off in any way. And I think sometimes I worried if when we had like the word vegan on the poster, it might deter people just seeing the V word. And I don't know. It's really difficult to figure out what was selling tickets and what wasn't. What I was kind of figuring out was that the main thing that was selling people is actually just, I mean, the flyering slog of going up to people, having a chat, having a genuine conversation with someone, and then not being around the bush and just kind of going, obviously, I'm here to fly you. Please come. And then, yeah, getting people through the door that way. I, Fringe is just so tricky in the way that it feels like a guessing game. Like you can prep so much, but you'll still find yourself feeling a bit confused or being like, why was there only two people in the audience tonight on a Friday night? And then why am I getting loads of people in on a Saturday? There's just like no consistency. And also, it's really important to go with a team, I think, because it was just me and Annie. It was just too much for two people. And another thing would be a lot of people that found success had PR companies on their side who also cost about like 2 grand for the month. So it's definitely a pay to play situation. And you want good adverts, you got to pay the big bucks. You got to be really good with social media. You got to post 3 times a day. It's just a lot of kind of admin work and raising money. Which I think is mainly the stressful part actually is the money really, because it's so expensive and it keeps getting more expensive each year. So it doesn't feel like it's sort of the inclusive place for performers in the way that it could be. Like there's so much opportunity. You know what? I say that. I go back a little bit because they do have like the free fringe and stuff, but again, free fringe is really hard to market your show because it's always, a mile out from the center. But the hard work can pay off, I think. I have seen there have been sort of some people that have come away from it with like life-changing things, TV deals, amazing connections, and the whole industry is there for a month, which is like an insane opportunity. So sometimes it's just it's high risk, high reward. You could risk it all, spend all your savings, and go, and maybe something huge will come of it. Or you could walk away with a couple of reviews and a, an empty bank account.
Yeah, yeah. I suppose
So
there's a few, not lessons, but a few points there in the sense of you took something there you're really passionate about, and I think that hopefully for you gave it some worth no matter what would happen. So you take that up, you're performing it. It's a cathartic experience for you, and you'd hope, yet, like you said, people go away and make a change, even if it's the smallest change around, or they're even just talking about it. And that itself is a reason to put it on, regardless of money or regardless of being picked up. And that's the plus. The plus is producer from Soho Theatre's there and goes, "Yep, let's take it," or whatever. So I suppose that's a really nice lesson for up and coming artists. Is if you are going to do it, it's a baptism of fire. So take something that you are clearly passionate about.
and also, if you don't take the risk, then you're never going to know what could have happened. And that is so much worse than taking the risk and then it kind of, it might go a bit wrong. Because, oh, the worst thing is just feeling like regret of not doing something. So I'd say it is, obviously, as long as you don't actually spend all your savings. But yeah, you've got to take the risk. And especially in the creative arts, a lot of the time you're going to feel like you're not getting anything back or you're not going anywhere. But the more you keep kind of like pushing yourself and jumping into it and just, yeah, you can start to kind of like get somewhere and just be a bit fearless about it. Risk is imperative.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's really inspiring. Thank you. That's risk is imperative. Put that on a t-shirt. Um,
But tattooed.
yeah, that I say baptism. I can't say the word baptism of fire. That really stressful and crazy, messy time in Fringe, but also before then and creating Meet Cute, and before even then as a performer who's also vegan and is really passionate about that and doing activism and what's happening, whatever. Now, did you have you had any in that journey? Have you had any personal breakthroughs, or like you said, have you had some really incredible conversations with audience members that have really not opened your eyes, but kind of confirmed or even inspired further thought around this quite unique Venn diagram of you as a performer, you as a creative, and you as a vegan? Has there been any areas, and there might have been a breakthrough of like, this is useless, I'm gonna just do whatever, or it might be a breakthrough of, oh my goodness, this is the best thing ever.
Yeah. I think career-wise it felt like a breakthrough in terms of gaining the confidence to be able to be a writer and performer and to actually have the kind of courage and confidence to put on something that is just fresh from your mind and then also to be the performer of it. Because I think at times it can feel a bit embarrassing in how it looks. Well, I don't know if anyone else feels the same, but like it felt a bit narcissistic of, flyering people with my face on and just being like, listen to me and my thoughts for an hour. But actually having such a great response in terms of a lot of people are so open to listening and understanding, and other creatives being so supportive and making like a really nice network around it as well. And then also finding like this whole new career in writing, which is kind of manifesting itself now, last and this year, has just been such a breath of fresh air. Because before that I was purely doing acting and I was like, I have no interest in writing. I don't ever, it feels like reading your diary to people. Like, I don't want to ever expose myself like that. But then it was so frustrating playing, I mean, especially, for women having to always play the girlfriend or the wife or the girlfriend or the wife, and oh, she's pregnant. And just being like so creatively unsatisfied in a lot of the roles. And then writing this character who is kind of like my dream character to play in the way that she's just a bit nuts and kind of doesn't have to be a wife or a girlfriend or pregnant was so exciting and so fun. And knowing that I can kind of like write these characters for other people, and my have my friends play them and see them play a character they're genuinely really excited to play. And kind of, yeah, knowing that now I can do that and it go okay. Yeah, I think that has been so nice, and kind of coming into a new career with that in mind. I've loved it, yeah.
Amazing. That's so good to hear. That's really lush. Okay, I suppose the last question is what's next?
What's next? So, my if I say friend, she'll be my best friend, Bella, and wife and confidant. We do a lot of writing together, and yeah, we're working on a project this year, which we're really excited about. She's also, I mean, the devil works hard. She works harder. Like she's a hustler. So I think having someone like her on my side is huge. And yeah, so I think that's the main thing we're going to focus on. And then I did write another play last summer, which was on at the Etc. Theatre, which was it was a first draft. It's rewritten now. It was called Forgive Me, Father, for I've sinned, but it's now called Whom the Gods Make Mad, which is quite a worthy title, I think. It's still a work in progress. But that's also, I mean, that's about like fusing religion and veganism and the argument there, because I had a bit of a religious stint when I was 14 and also want to get some opinions out about that. And I also think like it's quite interesting the way that the Bible approaches animals and how we should feel about animals, because I kind of have a feeling, obviously, because Christianity and religion is just so it's been around since nearly since the beginning of humankind, is like believing in something, believing in God, and the Bible stating all these things about how we should treat animals. I kind of feel like that's why it's so ingrained in us in a way, as such a core belief of like, we have dominion over animals. We are allowed to do X, Y, and Z to them because God says so. And still trying to, people still trying to justify that argument. It's Yeah, I think it's quite interesting kind of looking at those two, how it's still so relevant nowadays, even though we're kind of in a weird post-religious society, I feel, in the West. Well, in England at least. Yeah, so I'm really super passionate about that project, but again, it's going to be as a lot of time and money to pour into, so we'll see how it goes. I'm going to make any promises to myself yet.
Yeah, yeah. Well, fingers crossed. That sounds fascinating. It seems like there's a pattern there as well with picking things that are quite intimate to people and bring in another intimate thing. So with dating and love, and then veganism, and family as well. You've got there, but then also religion as well. That's really interesting. The technique there. I think that's really exciting. Well, I'm really looking forward to whatever unfolds. Thank you so much for taking time to answer all
Oh,
my
thank you. I've loved the
questions.
questions. I feel like I've managed to release all my opinions for the day. That'll keep me peace
Good.
for at least a week.
Yeah, I know exactly how you feel. And thank you, the listener, for listening. I hope you enjoyed the conversation I had with Bibi. If you did enjoy it, please think about reviewing and telling your friends, colleagues about this podcast series. You can find more episodes on all sorts of different platforms, as well as the website performinganimalrights.org. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, goodbye.